The morning rain hammered against the windows of the number 73 bus as Marcus Chen pressed his forehead against the cold glass, watching London blur past in streaks of grey and gold. His reflection stared back, exhausted eyes, the same white shirt he'd carefully ironed at 4 a.m., the Primark tie his mother had blessed with her tears the night before. "You show them, my brave boy," she'd whispered in Cantonese, pressing a wrapped sandwich into his hands. "You show them what we came here for." The sandwich sat untouched in his messenger bag, alongside the leather portfolio he'd bought second-hand, its corners carefully mended with superglue. Inside that portfolio lived 2 months of his life, 63 days of unpaid work, of arriving first and leaving last, of studying every campaign Whitmore Associates had ever produced. While other interns networked over Prosecco in Shoreditch bars, Marcus had sat in the stockroom of his family's takeaway, the smell of sweet and sour sauce clinging to his clothes as he refined his presentation for the 100th time. The Whitmore building rose before him like a glass giant, its lobby gleaming with the kind of marble his father had once laid in houses they could never afford. Marcus's badge, Intern, felt heavier than it should as he swiped in. The security guard, Dimitri, gave him the same warm nod he'd offered every morning. "Big day today, yeah?" Dimitri's knowing smile held the solidarity of someone who understood what it meant to be invisible in visible spaces. Charlotte Pemberton was already at her desk, her blonde hair catching the morning light like spun gold. She looked up as Marcus passed, offering a smile that seemed genuine, a rarity in these halls of calculated interactions. "Morning, Marcus. Ready for the presentation?" Her voice carried that particular British warmth that could mean everything or nothing at all. "Ready as I'll ever be," Marcus replied, his Birmingham accent carefully modulated. Not hidden, never hidden, but softened like edges worn smooth by constant handling. He'd learned that lesson in his first week when James Thornton, the creative director, had asked him to repeat himself 3 times during a simple greeting, each request accompanied by a smile sharp enough to cut glass. The preparation room was a fishbowl of floor-to-ceiling windows. Marcus spread his materials across the table with the reverence of a priest preparing communion. Each slide had been crafted with obsessive care, market research conducted on his own time, focus groups he'd organized using university friends, design elements he'd taught himself through YouTube tutorials watched on night buses home. The campaign was for Bramley and Sons, a heritage tea company struggling to connect with younger audiences. Marcus's solution was elegant in its simplicity. Steep your story, a campaign that honored tradition while embracing the multicultural reality of modern Britain. His phone buzzed, a text from his younger sister Lily. "Mum lit incense at the temple. Dad says you're already successful just for trying. We love you, X." Marcus's throat tightened. His father, who spoke 5 languages, but whose PhD from Beijing meant nothing here, who now smiled through 12-hour shifts frying chicken for drunk students. His mother, who'd been a nurse in Guangzhou, but here cleaned offices at night because her qualifications weren't recognized. Every sacrifice they'd made led to this moment. Charlotte appeared in the doorway, her presence bringing the scent of expensive perfume. "They're ready for you." Something flickered in her eyes. Was it sympathy? Warning? She fumbled with her phone, dropping it back into her designer bag with unusual clumsiness. "Marcus," she started, then stopped. "Just be yourself." The boardroom stretched before him like an ocean of dark wood and darker suits. 5 figures sat in judgment, James Thornton at the center, his silver hair and pink Financial Times creating a portrait of established power. To his left, Rebecca Hayes from HR, her smile professionally frozen. The others, senior partners whose names Marcus knew, but who'd never acknowledged his existence, regarded him with the detached interest of scientists observing a specimen. "Mr. Chen," Thornton's voice filled the room like expensive whiskey, smooth and burning. "We are eager to see what our intern from—" A pause, a glance at papers. "Birmingham City University has prepared for us. The emphasis on his university hung in the air like incense at a funeral. Marcus's hands didn't shake as he opened his portfolio. His voice didn't waver as he began. "Good morning. I'd like to present a campaign that speaks to the heart of what Bramley and Sons could become, a bridge between the Britain that was and the Britain that is." As Marcus spoke, something magical happened. The room began to fade away. He wasn't in a boardroom anymore. He was in his family's kitchen, explaining his dreams to parents who'd given up their own. He was in lecture halls where professors had doubted him, in job fairs where recruiters had looked through him. Every rejection, every sacrifice, every moment of feeling like he was swimming upstream in a river that wasn't meant for him, it all poured into his words. The presentation was flawless. The market research, impeccable. The creative vision, inspired. For 15 minutes, Marcus Chen wasn't an intern from Birmingham with the wrong accent and the wrong suit. He was a storyteller, painting a vision of a campaign that could transform a dying brand into a living testament to modern Britain's beautiful complexity. When he finished, the silence was complete. Thornton's fingers drummed against the table, manicured nails creating a countdown to judgment. The other partners exchanged glances, their faces unreadable as expensive watches. James Thornton stood slowly, his movement deliberate as a chess grandmaster positioning for checkmate. He walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back, forcing Marcus to address his shoulders. A power move so textbook it might have been funny if Marcus's entire future wasn't balanced on this moment. "Mr. Chen," Thornton began, still facing the London skyline, "tell me, what do you think distinguishes great advertising from merely competent work?" Before Marcus could answer, Thornton continued, "It's understanding one's audience, not just demographically, but culturally, spiritually, if you will." He turned, his smile as thin as paper. "Bramley and Sons has been serving tea to British families since 1847. Their customers shop at Waitrose, holiday in the Cotswolds, and send their children to schools that have produced prime ministers." Each word landed like a carefully placed stone, building a wall between Marcus and his dreams. "Your campaign," Thornton lifted one of Marcus's carefully prepared boards, holding it between two fingers as if it might stain his suit, "suggests we feature a Pakistani family sharing tea during Eid, a Polish couple in their flat, a Caribbean grandmother teaching her granddaughter their recipe." He set it down with exaggerated care. "It's all very diverse. These communities represent 40% of London's tea consumption," Marcus interjected, his voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. "The data shows..." "The data?" Thornton's laugh was cultivated, weaponized disappointment. "Mr. Chen, data doesn't buy heritage brands. Aspiration does. And frankly," he gestured vaguely at Marcus, encompassing everything from his high street suit to his stubborn accent, "you seem to misunderstand what our clients aspire to be." Rebecca from HR shifted uncomfortably, her pen scratching notes that would later be filed under performance concerns. The other partners remained silent, their complicity dressed in expensive neutrality. Thornton returned to his seat, pulling his reading glasses from his breast pocket with theatrical precision. "Let me be educational here, since that's what internships are for. Your research is competent. I suppose those late nights in the office weren't entirely wasted. But competence without comprehension is rather like..." He paused, savoring his metaphor. "Like serving fish and chips at Claridge's. It might fill the stomach, but it rather misses the point, doesn't it?" A nervous titter ran through the room. Someone's coffee cup clinked against its saucer, the sound sharp as breaking bones. "Furthermore," Thornton continued, warming to his theme, "there's a certain polish that comes from understanding these things intuitively. It's not something one can learn from YouTube tutorials or night classes. It's bred in, if you understand my meaning, like a good thoroughbred knows how to run without being taught." Marcus felt heat rise in his face, but his voice remained level. "With respect, Mr. Thornton, Bramley and Sons is hemorrhaging market share precisely because they hired the wrong agency last year," Thornton interrupted smoothly. not because they need to abandon their core identity. He removed his glasses, cleaning them with slow deliberation. You see, Mr. Chen, there's the Britain you see on the evening news, and then there's the Britain that actually moves money. They're not the same thing. One is a lovely multicultural tapestry, very BBC, very modern. The other signs the checks. The folder containing Marcus's work, 2 months of 16-hour days, was pushed across the table with the casual indifference of clearing away crumbs. I'm sure this experience has been valuable for you. Perhaps a smaller agency, something more accessible, might be a better fit. There are several in Zone 3 that cater to diverse markets. I could make some calls. Zone 3, the geographic boundary of ambition, the line between those who belonged and those who visited. Marcus's hands moved automatically, gathering his materials with the practiced efficiency of someone used to clearing tables, to making himself small, to disappearing. But as his fingers closed around his portfolio, something crystallized in his chest. Not anger, but a clarity sharp as winter air. "Mr. Thornton," Marcus said, his Birmingham accent pronounced now, claimed rather than hidden. "You're right that I don't understand your clients intuitively. I had to learn them, study them, the way my parents studied English from textbooks, the way they memorized bus routes to neighborhoods they'd never live in." He straightened, meeting Thornton's gaze directly. "But maybe that's why I can see what you can't, that your clients' children are marrying people like me, working with people like me, living in a Britain that looks like my campaign." The room held its breath. Thornton's face cycled through shades of pink approaching purple. "That's quite enough, Mr. Chen. Rebecca, please ensure Mr. Chen's internship evaluation reflects the full scope of today's presentation." As Marcus turned to leave, Thornton's voice followed him, lower now, meant only for the room but carrying with perfect clarity. "This is precisely why we need to be more careful with the internship program. It's cruel, really, to give false hope to people who'll never quite fit. Better to maintain standards at entry than deal with this sort of unpleasantness." The door closed behind Marcus with a soft click. He didn't hear what came next. The casual cruelty that followed his exit like vultures descending on remains. "Thank God that's over," Thornton sighed. "Rebecca, make sure we code his exit as cultural fit issues. And for Christ's sake, let's stick to Russell Group universities going forward. I don't care what diversity quotas HR is pushing. We're not a charity." "The boy actually had some interesting ideas," one partner ventured weakly. "Of course he did. They always do. Hungry people usually work harder, but clients don't want interesting from those people. They want reassurance. They want to see themselves reflected, not reformed." Thornton poured himself water from a crystal decanter. "Check his work for anything usable, though. These diversity hires sometimes stumble onto good ideas we can refine. Just make sure there's no paper trail back to him." In her chair, Charlotte Pemberton sat frozen, her forgotten phone in her bag, still recording, capturing every word like evidence at a crime scene. The casual dissection of Marcus's dreams, the systematic explanation of how to keep people like him out, the laughter that followed someone's joke about his accent, it all streamed into digital memory, waiting. Charlotte excused herself, her legs unsteady. In the bathroom, she locked herself in a stall and pulled out her phone, discovering the recording by accident. 43 minutes of audio. She listened with mounting horror, her stomach twisting as she heard her own nervous laugh at one of Thornton's crueler observations. She hadn't even realized she'd laughed. Meanwhile, Marcus sat in the building's atrium, his untouched coffee growing cold. His phone screen showed 16 missed calls from his mother. She knew, somehow she always knew, when her children were hurting. But he couldn't answer, couldn't form the words to explain that despite doing everything right, despite being twice as good, it still wasn't enough. A shadow fell across his table. Dmitri, the security guard, set down a wrapped sandwich. "My wife makes extra," he said simply, his Russian accent thick with understanding. "Is good day for sandwich." That evening, Charlotte Pemberton made a decision that would change everything. Sitting in her Holland Park flat, surrounded by the comfort of inherited privilege, she created an anonymous account and uploaded the recording. Her finger hovered over the share button for an eternity. Then she thought of Marcus's dignity as he'd gathered his rejected work, the quiet strength in his response to Thornton's cruelty, and pressed it. The video exploded across the internet like digital wildfire. Within hours, as Whitmore elitism was trending, Marcus Chen became the face of every brilliant person denied opportunity because they didn't fit the mold. The recording was brutal in its clarity, not just the rejection, but the system behind it, exposed in Thornton's own words. By midnight, Marcus sat in his family's takeaway, the closed sign flipped hours ago, watching his story spread across screens like spilled ink. His mother sat beside him, her hand on his shoulder, while his father mechanically refilled tea they weren't drinking. Lily had taken over his phone, fielding calls from journalists, protecting him with fierce efficiency. BBC wants a statement, she announced. Sky News is literally outside, and someone from The Guardian says they're running a front-page story tomorrow about class discrimination in creative industries. On the television mounted in the corner, Marcus's face appeared on the late news. They'd found his LinkedIn photo, the one where he'd tried so hard to look professional, where his smile was careful and contained. Below it scrolled the headline, "Viral video exposes ugly truth of British corporate culture. Turn it off," his mother said quietly in Cantonese. "This isn't good. Tall trees catch the wind." But they couldn't turn it off. It was everywhere. Twitter had discovered Thornton's history, a pattern of discrimination lawsuits quietly settled, a former employee who'd attempted suicide after similar treatment, a charity he'd founded that mysteriously only gave scholarships to students from 7 specific schools. The internet was building a case with the ruthless efficiency of prosecutors who never sleep. Charlotte's phone rang. Her father's name flashed on the screen. "Charlotte, what the bloody hell is happening? James called me absolutely livid. Says you might be involved in this ambush." "Dad, I don't want to hear it. I pulled strings to get you that position. Do you understand what you've done? James is talking about suing for defamation, corporate espionage, God knows what else. Did you watch the video, Dad? Did you hear what they said?" A pause. "That's how the world works, darling. It's not pretty, but it's reality. The boy would never have been happy at Whitmore anyway. Wrong fit. This video nonsense is just prolonging the inevitable." Charlotte felt something break inside her, clean and necessary, like a fever breaking. "Like how I'm the right fit? Because of my surname, my school? Because you play golf with James? Because you understand how things work? Because you don't rock boats you're lucky to be sailing in?" After he hung up, Charlotte sat in the darkness of her inherited privilege, feeling it for the first time like a weight rather than wings. Her laptop pinged with notifications. She was being tagged in comments. People had found her connection to Whitmore, were calling for her to speak up. She began typing a statement, then deleted it. Started again. Deleted. The truth sat heavy in her chest, demanding release. The next morning, Whitmore Associates resembled a fortress under siege. Security guards checked IDs at the door. Partners arrived through the parking garage to avoid the growing crowd of protesters and media. James Thornton held an emergency meeting at 7 a.m., his face haggard from a sleepless night of crisis management. "We're implementing immediate response protocol," he announced to the senior staff. "No one speaks to media. All communications go through legal. If anyone asks about the Chen situation, you refer them to HR." He paused, his jaw clenching. "And if any of you recorded that meeting, now would be the time to come forward before we find out ourselves." Silence. Charlotte sat among them, her guilt a living thing crawling up her throat. "The video has been viewed 8 million times," Rebecca from HR reported, her voice hollow. "We've lost 3 major clients already. Bramley and Sons is threatening to pull their entire account unless we make this right." "Make it right." Thornton's laugh was bitter. "What do they want, a public flogging? We rejected an unsuitable candidate. It happens every day." "Not like this." Rebecca said quietly, showing rare courage. James, have you actually watched the full recording? The things you said after he left? Things said in private, in confidence, taken out of context. Thornton slammed his hand on the table. This is corporate terrorism, nothing less. Meanwhile, Marcus stood in his family's kitchen, wearing his only suit again, as Lily fixed his tie. The BBC had sent a car. His first television interview was in an hour, and his hands wouldn't stop shaking. "You don't have to do this," his mother said, her worry written in the lines around her eyes. "We can go back to being quiet, safe." Marcus took her hands in his. "Mum, how many nights did you cry because your nursing degree meant nothing here? How many times did Dad hide his frustration when people assumed he couldn't understand complex English?" He squeezed gently. "I'm not just doing this for me. I'm doing it for every kid in Birmingham who's been told they're not the right fit before they even get a chance to try." The interview was scheduled for the morning show, prime time, millions watching. As Marcus was getting microphoned up, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Marcus, it's Charlotte. I need you to know. I recorded it. I uploaded it. I'm going public in an hour. You deserve better. We all deserve better. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." Marcus stared at the message, his world tilting. Charlotte Pemberton, golden girl, insider, everything he could never be, had lit the match that burned down her own house. The interview began. The presenter, a woman with kind eyes and a sharp mind, leaned forward. "Marcus, your story has resonated with millions. What do you want people to understand about what happened to you?" Marcus thought of Dimitri and his sandwich, of his parents and their sacrifices, of Charlotte and her courage, of every person who'd ever been told they didn't belong. "I want people to understand that talent doesn't have an accent, innovation doesn't have a postcode, and brilliance doesn't always come in the packages we're trained to recognize." He looked directly at the camera, speaking to every kid watching from the wrong side of the divide. "Your ideas matter. Your perspective is valuable, and if they won't let you in the door, sometimes you have to show the world what they're missing." Charlotte Pemberton stood outside the BBC broadcasting house, her decision made. She'd watched Marcus's interview from her phone, seen the dignity with which he'd refused to name names or seek revenge, only advocating for change. Now it was her turn. Inside Whitmore Associates, panic had transformed into chaos. Charlotte's public statement had just gone live, a detailed confession of her role, her privilege, and most devastatingly, a call for structural change in the industry. She'd included receipts, emails showing how internships were filtered by university, statistics on the company's hiring practices, proof that in 10 years, not a single intern from a non-Russell Group university had been offered a permanent position. The traitor was Charlotte Pemberton, someone whispered, and the name rippled through the office like wildfire. James Thornton stood in his corner office, watching his world unravel. His phone hadn't stopped ringing. Board members, clients, his wife. The industry awards had just rescinded his lifetime achievement honor. The Garrick Club was reviewing his membership. Everything he'd built over 30 years was crumbling in 30 hours. "Sir?" Rebecca stood in his doorway. "The board is here. They're in conference room A." The walk to his execution was lined with the faces of employees pretending to work, their eyes following him like a funeral procession. In the conference room, 5 board members sat with the gravity of judges at a tribunal. "James," the chairman began without preamble, "we need your resignation, effective immediately. This is insane. One viral video and you're throwing me to the wolves." "It's not just the video, James. It's what the video revealed. We've had 17 former employees come forward in the last 24 hours with similar experiences. The Times is running an exposé tomorrow. We're facing potential lawsuits that could destroy this firm. And the Chen boy, the chairman's voice was ice, has had 43 job offers since his interview this morning. Google, Apple, and the BBC are in a bidding war for him. Meanwhile, we can't get a client to return our calls." Marcus, in fact, was sitting in a cafe in Birmingham, overwhelmed by the notifications flooding his phone. Job offers, interview requests, messages of support from strangers who'd faced their own Thorntons. But what struck him most was a message from a young Pakistani girl in Bradford. "I watched you on TV. I'm applying to university next year. I was scared I wouldn't fit in. But now I know we don't have to fit in. We can build our own doors." Charlotte had returned to her flat to find her father waiting. Richard Pemberton QC sat in her living room like a monument to disappointment. "You've destroyed everything," he said simply. "Your career, our family's reputation, relationships built over generations." "No, Dad," Charlotte replied, surprised by her own calm. "I've destroyed a system that was destroying others, and if our reputation was built on that system, then it needed to fall." "You're so naive, Charlotte. You think this changes anything? There will always be insiders and outsiders. You've just moved yourself from one category to the other." "Then I'm in better company now." Her father left without another word. Charlotte sat in the silence that followed, her phone buzzing with its own flood of messages, some calling her a traitor, others calling her a hero. She was neither, she knew. She was just someone who'd finally chosen to see. That evening, something unexpected happened. Bramley and Sons, the heritage tea company that had started it all, made an announcement. They were launching Marcus's Steep Your Story campaign, and they wanted him to lead it as their new creative director. Not as an intern, not as a junior associate, but as the youngest creative director in their 177-year history. 6 months later, Marcus Chen stood in a different boardroom, this one filled with natural light and diverse faces. The Steep Your Story campaign had increased Bramley and Sons' market share by 34%. More importantly, it had started conversations in kitchens across Britain about tradition and change, about who belongs and who decides, about the stories we steep in our daily rituals. The campaign featured real families. The Pakistani family he'd originally proposed, sharing tea during Eid, the Polish couple in their flat in Hammersmith, debating politics over Earl Grey, the Caribbean grandmother in Brixton, teaching her granddaughter to read tea leaves. And yes, the family in the Cotswolds, their tradition now part of a larger tapestry, rather than the only thread. Charlotte Pemberton had taken a different path. She'd founded a non-profit called Open Doors, dedicated to creating genuine internship opportunities for students from all backgrounds. It was harder work than she'd ever done at Whitmore, and infinitely more rewarding. She and Marcus had coffee once a month, their unlikely friendship a bridge between worlds that were learning slowly to meet. James Thornton had disappeared into early retirement, his name becoming shorthand for a type of discrimination that companies now rushed to distance themselves from. Whitmore Associates had undergone a complete restructuring, their new diversity initiatives genuine rather than performative, born from necessity rather than virtue. But the real change wasn't in the headlines or the corporate reshuffles. It was in the thousands of young people who'd seen Marcus's story and realized their own worth wasn't determined by their accent, their postcode, or their parents' connections. It was in the companies that started looking beyond the usual pipelines, discovering brilliance in unexpected places. It was in the conversations happening in boardrooms where someone would now say, "Are we having a Thornton moment?" when bias crept in. Dimitri, the security guard, still worked at the Whitmore building, but now he also consulted for their HR department, helping them understand the perspectives of their invisible workforce. His PhD from Moscow still wasn't recognized, but his wisdom finally was. Marcus's parents had framed the newspaper clipping of his BBC interview, hanging it next to his graduation photo in their takeaway. His mother no longer cried over sacrifices. She smiled over possibilities. His father had started teaching Mandarin to business executives, his languages finally valued. Lily was applying to universities, her brother's story making her bold in her ambitions. The video that had started it all, that grainy, accidental recording, had been viewed 47 million times. It was taught in business schools as a case study in crisis management, in sociology classes as an example of institutional bias, in media courses as the anatomy of viral justice. But for Marcus, it remained something simpler, the moment when someone else's courage gave him a voice. On a rainy Tuesday, exactly 1 year after that fateful presentation, Marcus received a package. Inside was a simple card and an expensive pen, the kind Thornton had once used to sign dismissals. The card read, "For writing your own story, with admiration and apology, Charlotte." Marcus smiled, picked up the pen, and began sketching his next campaign. This one was for a British bank, and it was about trust. Who earns it, who inherits it, and how sometimes the most valuable currency is the chance to prove yourself. Outside his office window, London sprawled in all its complex glory, a city of villages and divisions, of old money and new dreams, of closed doors and the hands that pry them open. Somewhere in that maze, another young person was preparing for an interview, practicing their presentation, moderating their accent, hoping to fit in. But now, they also knew something else. Sometimes, not fitting in is exactly what the world needs. Sometimes, the wrong voice saying the right thing at the right time can change everything. And sometimes, what goes viral isn't just a video. It's the possibility of a different future, spreading from screen to screen, heart to heart, until even the tallest walls begin to crack. The rain had stopped. London gleamed with the promise of cleared skies. And Marcus Chen, the intern from Birmingham, who'd been told he'd never fit, sat in his creative director's office, using an expensive pen to sketch campaigns that would tell everyone's story. The view count on the original video continued to climb, but the real number that mattered couldn't be measured in metrics. It was the countless moments of courage it inspired, the doors it helped open, the voices it helped find. What went viral wasn't just Marcus's rejection. It was the radical idea that talent comes in every accent. Brilliance wears every price point of suit, and sometimes the most powerful thing in the world is simply someone with nothing to lose saying, "This isn't right." And Charlotte Pemberton, who'd uploaded that video from a place of privilege and emerged in a place of purpose, had learned perhaps the most important lesson of all, that real power isn't in keeping your seat at the table. It's in knowing when to flip the table over and build a bigger one. The story that went viral wasn't just about rejection or redemption. It was about recognition, of worth, of dignity, of the dreams that cross oceans and generations to land in a London boardroom, waiting for someone brave enough to see them for what they really are. The future, dressed in an unexpected suit, speaking in an accent that sounds like tomorrow.